Hi, welcome to My Favorite Mistake. I'm your host, Mark Graban. Our guest today is Joe Davis. He is managing director and senior partner at the Boston Consulting Group, or BCG. And he's also author of the book, The Generous Leader, 7 Ways to Give of Yourself for Everyone's Gain. Joe has more than 40 years of experience managing and leading teams. He's also served as chair of BCG's Center for Inclusion and Equity and is a founding steering committee member of CEO Action for Racial Equity and the Southern Communities Initiative. So, Joe, thank you for being here on the podcast. How are you?
I'm well, Mark, and thank you for having me. It's very nice to be here.
Yeah, it's great to have you. I will put a link to information about Joe's book in the show notes and the website, joedavis.com. I've got to ask, did you buy that in the late 90s or something?
No, I bought it 1 year ago. The people that helped me figure out how to do that on GoDaddy or wherever that is were so surprised it was available, as was I.
Good for you. joedavis.com. Very easy to say and spell. And remember, so no mistake there. But before we talk about the book and some of the other things you've done in your career, Joe, I'd like to start off with the main question here. What would you say is your favorite mistake?
Okay, my favorite mistake, and I love the word favorite. It means it doesn't have to be the biggest, but it can be the one you learn most from, I believe.
Exactly.
And you know what it is? It's actually many, many years ago. I was 24, 25, and I was working at Procter and Gamble as I started as a sales rep and got promoted, 2 or 3 years to sales manager. And I had 4 sales people working for me. One was a management track, so you didn't do much with them because they just worked their rear off. And then the 3 were career salespeople who were great guys. Great people. And I used to ride with them every 2 weeks. But I got to tell you, I was 24, and to me, they were very old. I think they were 40 or something. And I was afraid to tell them anything about what they should do differently, because who am I, some kid, to tell them anything? And what did I know other than what was in the manual that P&G had trained me? So I never really gave feedback. And then when we came to the annual review, I remember this so well, and it stuck with me. 40 years. Yeah. I wrote the person's review, and I wrote everything this person did. His name was Rich, incorrectly as per the book, and any advice I had, all the counsel, and never had said a thing, and started going through the review with him. And he stops me about 5 minutes or maybe 3 minutes and said, "Wait a minute, Joe, you ride with me every 2 weeks and you've never told me a single one of things." It was so embarrassing. It was, and I don't remember, I have to say now, 40 years later, what I said at that moment. I'm sure I mumbled something. And then we must have finished the review, and he left, and my boss said, "Never again write a review where they don't understand every idea you're going to." I think he said every word. It's a little too much to ask. Every idea you are going to tell them. And that has stuck with me.
Wow.
Forever in my life. And it's one of the main stories, especially with young people, when talk about how to give feedback. One thing, there's a lot of richness giving the feedback, but one thing is you got to give it, if you don't give it.
Wow. So another way of saying that is like somebody shouldn't ever be surprised by what they're hearing at their annual review, right?
Or even, at the company I work for, we give reviews at the end of every project. You work on a project with a client, we write up a review, and it could be 8 weeks, it could be, as you say, a year. And if you worked with someone so intensely for 8 weeks and you surprise them, something's wrong with you. And of course, you and I both know there's a lot going on there. Like, first off, you're scared. I was scared. 24-year-old kid. You're worried about, if I give feedback that's not nice, what are they going to think of me? There's books written on this stuff.
Yeah. But that seems like something where if you felt that way and you recognize you were holding back or scared, your manager or somebody higher up, woulda, coulda, shoulda, could have been coaching you about, or at least creating the opportunity for you to ask, what advice do you have about giving feedback, age dynamics or otherwise? Because that's difficult for a lot of people to give feedback.
Oh, yeah. No, you're right. And I can't remember if, P&G 40 years ago I mean, it's still an exceptional company, but it was one of the management track companies of the globe, So I'm sure I was told, now, when you ride with people, give them this. And I just, but what we didn't do is role model it or practice it, or, and it never was the boss and me and the sales guy. There's, yes. Well, I'm going to blame it on myself, but maybe I wasn't being pushed as hard as I should have, but I'm still going to blame it on myself.
Well, I mean, I appreciate your reflection on that. And like you said, I mean, it's a long time ago and some of the details might be fuzzy, but clearly the main point of that moment stuck with you. I think that's really a good definition of what is a favorite mistake. It's something that you remember, and there was some lesson. I mean, how long were you there? Did you go from P&G to BCG?
I was at P&G 6 years, and I went to business school. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
and I've been at it's interesting because you said roles over 40 years, and I always think, no, I'm only 37 at BCG, but I forgot I had 6 more years of work, which were very formative 6 years. Yeah, I went straight from there to BCG.
Yeah. So then in consulting, the way, kind of hiring and progressions tend to work, it's probably pretty rare in consulting to be back in that same scenario of having direct reports who are significantly older. Is that fair to say?
Direct report. Yes, that's a very fair to say. I mean, I'm the third oldest person at BCG, or third most tenured. So, when I ran BCG North America, 70% of staff was under 29 years old.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's an up or out type of place. Whether you don't fit or whether you don't like the work style, the life, not lifestyle, but the hard work. Yeah. But even there, it's rare that it's up, but there's plenty. I mean, we promote people after 2 years, and it's pretty hard. For maybe whether you're 27, 25, or 29, to give feedback to anybody. And in BCG, sorry, I don't want to go too much, but it's an up or out environment. So you actually have to give feedback, or you're really not treating the person fairly.
Right.
Although there was another lesson, even at BCG, we had left side was on the piece of paper was all the good stuff, and the right side was everything you had to work on. And we'd always have like a little bit of ink on the left, the good side, and the right side was pure. And I used to say, well, yeah, because if you don't fix all those, you don't get promoted. But we completely missed the fact on whole of recognition and feedback and development of what are as a person's strengths, and how to leverage those strengths to actually help deal with some of the opportunity areas. And we've changed a lot over time, but that's the other mistake. That's more of a macro mistake. That's a macro mistake all people do. It's just, let me tell you, you're not good enough at this. You're not good enough at this, as opposed to, hey, you're not good at this. I don't want to do the sandwich thing, but listen, you are very exceptional in these 4 ways. Leverage them to deliver.
Right. I heard somebody talking recently that some of the guidance anymore is to give 5 pieces of positive feedback, or catch somebody doing something well for every 1 piece of constructive feedback. I'm not saying that would be universally applicable advice, but I think your point is a common one of we forget to mention the positives because we think, well, that person knows what they're doing well. They know what they're good at. They don't need to hear it, but maybe that's not always true.
No, I agree with you. Or, another thing I believe, you have to, if you really want to give good, direct, clear feedback, you have to develop a relationship of trust to some level. And people, whether it's, they know it, or put that aside, if you tell them you're recognizing them, you're respecting them as a person, you're creating your own relationship, if they're your direct report of yours, you're building a relationship. That now gives you the freedom to then give, in the moment, which I failed, direct and clear feedback, as long as you care about them as a person or you care about them developing. I don't care which. I mean, I prefer you care about a person and developing, but you can just care about them developing, and that still counts. But you got to earn, you have to earn a relationship, which is a version of your 5 positives, I presume.
Yeah. And I forget who I need to give credit to for that. It's not my 5 positives.
No. You said someone said it.
Yeah. And I don't disown the idea because, I mean, to me, there's a reminder As an engineer, and this has served me well in a lot of ways in my career. I tend to point out, identify the problem, the risk, the gap, the things that need to be improved. And I've tried to learn over time. I'm not the young MBA hotshot anymore. As you get through your career, there's certain mistakes I've had to learn from too.
It's interesting, Mark, that just triggered. I had a client once who said, Joe, you only point out the negatives. You only start with the negatives. Now, I could be self-reflective enough, say, okay, well, consultants have to point out what's wrong because then we can pay to get it fixed. Hire them to fix it, us to fix it. But putting that aside, this was a person I had a relationship with over multiple months, and I was just so conditioned on, and it's not actually, it's good, but it's not the healthiest. It's sure not the healthiest way to start to the 5 positives. Yeah. But it was really interesting. She just she didn't slap me, but it's like, whoa, I thought I was a person.
I mean, what do you think about, personally, I'll turn this into a question, but I pause or even cringe sometimes at what one of my mentors used to call happy talk of like, well, instead of calling it a problem, we're going to just use the word opportunity. And like, to me, a problem and an opportunity are a little different. I mean, we can point out problems. To me, opportunities are maybe a little more aspirational. I mean, I'm curious what you think about those words as a leader and somebody trying to give feedback to others.
Well, I think if you created the right relationship with your people and they know you're coming from a place of care, I actually believe, I don't like the word problem, but I believe being direct on here's what you have to fix or you're in trouble, I think that's just fine.
Yeah.
I really believe. Now, if you have no relationship with them and therefore they just view you as a jerk, I'm not sure that's going to work so well. But the trophies for last place team on your 8-year-old soccer kid, I'm not going to begrudge that. But I sure don't really agree with it. I don't know how to think about it, but that's not
right.
And I think in the work environment. Yeah, I'll tell you, one time I had a fellow present to the executive team, CEO and the whole team. He was mid-level person at BCG. He's 30 years old, and he used the word like all the time. As
a filler word.
Yeah, like Mark, it's great I'm on your show. I really like to be in. Like I got an idea. And it's embarrassing in front of a C-suite of it. It's okay if you're 16. No. Anyway, afterwards, we stayed in the room, and I said, we gave feedback to each other. I said, Alex, how old are you? This is really direct. He's 30. I said, 30. 16-year-olds say like. Don't ever say like again in front of the client. And and the whole team was still in the room. He said, you just slapped me in the face, but I never said like again.
Yeah.
And I knew I had a relationship with him that I could be direct. But so depending on how you want to phrase it, where it's coming from, opportunity versus problem. I don't know. I don't like the word problem, but this is what you need to work on. These are the things you need to develop.
Yeah.
There's in between those two words too.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think saying something like, whether it's to a client or an employee, team member, here's what you need to do, is positive. Like it's direct. Like direct doesn't necessarily mean negative.
No. I think direct means clear. You hear more people give what I call mush feedback. Well, that meeting, you did pretty well, that you were a little bit off, and sometimes you didn't talk very clearly. Just do better.
Well,
what am I doing with that feedback? I did something wrong, but you didn't tell me what,
Yeah. No, I mean, I think the best feedback is specific. Like, there's teams I've worked with where they try to practice, not being vague even about the positives of like, oh, you did a great job. Like, well, say what specifically is worth doing more of, or what to build upon.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I don't know if you like all these stories, but I'll tell you one other story.
Go ahead. Yeah.
Just on the issue, for me, a very learning moment. It was tough. I had a mentor, and he said, Joe, I could put you and this other person in a room, 4 white walls, and give you a very difficult problem, and you don't get out till you solve it. You'll probably never get out of the room. This other guy will get out of the room every time. However, when you're out of the room, if I say, now go get it done, he'll never get it done. You will get it done 100% of the time. So, and he pointed out my strengths are collaborating, surrounding myself with good people, figuring out what it's going to take to get it done.
Mhm.
And maybe not solo genius analyst. That part was a little harsh, but it was a very good. It was a good reminder. Leverage the strengths one has.
Mhm. Yeah. One other question, Joe, before we kind of talk about some of the themes in the book. Were there any opportunities to kind of build upon your story from back at P&G to think about BCG consultants who were inevitably advising people who were much older than them? So let's say, the early MBA graduate working with an executive team. Were there any particular dynamics to help people navigate that more effectively? Or was it really more just about effective relationships and feedback?
Oh well, if I understand your story, I do.
Right.
If you're going to, I think there's 2 points. I think
Yeah.
I understand your question. If you're a younger quote unquote consultant navigating clients who may be older, but in the line,
That's what I was trying to ask.
that
Yes.
live in the thing. I think there's 2 things that I think are important, and it doesn't matter consulting, but there you're right. It's
Mhm.
even more maybe amplified. 2 things I think are critical. I think it's any client, let's use that example, wants at least you to get into their head. And they make the joke about, oh, take my watch or the time, but they do want you to know what they know, so you go beyond it. You don't just repeat what they know. That's the so it's. I think one thing that's really critical is actually, and I'm a big believer in this. Really, what do you call it? Listening to learn or taking the other's
Mhm.
perspective, but really understanding. I said, Z, and they were thinking D. What's going on here? What does D mean? And
Mhm.
if you're, whether it's consulting or anything, if you come in with what you think is an answer and don't know what's in their head or the
Mm.
challenges, you got half an answer. The other thing I used to say, and I believe this dearly, and it kind of goes along with saying is, engage the skeptics and uncover the no's. So
Uh-huh.
you've got an idea, and this could be anywhere in a plant. Hey, I got a great idea. Oh, it won't work.
Yeah.
Don't presume those people are noologists just trying to block you. They know something you don't know.
Right.
So go. Oh, why won't it work? Well, because ABC. Well, I solved ABC. Nah, you didn't because X, Y. Holy moly! I got to
Yeah.
go. I got to think about this deep. So I think that's really listening is one thing.
Mhm.
I think the clients, or not even clients, people with whom you're trying to crack something or solve something or get to a new level,
Yeah.
that's what brings in the power of teamwork. I mean,
Mhm.
Alex Dorsky, I was listening to him at a conference where I spoke, and he said, you don't have to be the smartest person in the room as the leader. You have to get the smartest answer or idea out
Mhm.
of the room.
Yeah.
That was clever, which sometimes says turn the team on and then go get a water and go to the bathroom for a while. Leave the room and let them run for a bit. Because
Right.
otherwise sometimes they're afraid to talk in front of the quote unquote boss.
Yeah. Yeah. So again, we're joined today, Joe Davis. The book is titled "The Generous Leader: 7 Ways to Give of Yourself for Everyone's Gain." First off, how do you define generosity and being a generous leader?
Yeah, no, and it's not about paying more. That's nice.
I figured.
I
Yeah.
think
Right.
everybody figures that, but you never, of
Right.
course.
You gave us a great bonus. Thanks for being
I
generous.
think,
But no,
that
how do you
sounds
really define
that
this?
sounds like the games some of those tech companies play, which are exceptional companies, but I'm not sure. Anyway, what I define a generous leader as someone who gives of themselves freely without expectation of direct personal benefit so
Hmm.
that others can grow, develop, and thrive at their full potential.
Hmm.
That's what I think. Now, I'm going to give you a second half of this because it's interesting. Some people say, well, but Joe, don't you have to drive results? And I'm not saying just be nice. I mean, we just had the whole
Right.
conversation around direct feedback. And
Right.
Joaquin Duato, he's in the book. I talked to him. He's the CEO of Johnson and Johnson.
Hmm.
He said something to me. He said, Joe, it's trying and your best effort. Those are all nice, but if you're the leader, results and outcomes matter. But then he
Hmm.
said something I thought was very powerful. But the sooner you realize that, and the sooner you get past yourself, have the maturity to get past you, and understand
Mm.
that you need to unlock, he used the word, the human traits, the
Hmm.
capabilities of your team, the sooner you will get to the best answer.
Yeah.
Which I thought was pretty interesting. So of course, if you don't get results, you're not a leader, you don't have a job,
Right.
but you don't get results. as a solo practitioner if you're a manager.
Mhm.
And I, and then therefore when I go to the level generous, it's my job is to make sure you all, you know, deliver, if I want to use a business word, or thrive
Mhm.
at your highest potential. Because
Right.
everyone's going to win if that's working.
Right. So it sounds like this leadership generosity, it's the opposite of this transactional quid pro quo. I'm going to do something for you only because I'm going to get something out of it. It's the opposite of that, right?
Well, in spirit and in heart, yes.
Yes.
I mean, the
Yeah.
truth is, if you help your team all thrive, you as the leader are going to get something out of it because you're
Well,
going
sure.
to have. So, yeah, but that's not the
Right.
objective. No, there is a mental difference there, and
Right.
people will feel it too. I think the other thing. I mean, it's also that you're respecting an individual as a human, as a person, et cetera, et cetera. And when you said, I just think the days I can pick on IBM, the white shirt, blue suit, everyone's identical,
Hmm.
or Jack Welch's fire the bottom 10 or 20%. I mean, where people are nothing but a cog in the
Hmm.
organization field. That doesn't work anymore.
Yeah.
The best can just leave. And I think about this, what's happened, this is COVID made it secure, but work life is just blurred. You
Hmm.
no longer leave one there and one there. And that started with the BlackBerry when all of a sudden, 1990,
Hmm.
now you're on 24/7, just
Yeah.
went on and on and on to Zoom and then COVID. I think neither of us are in an office. It doesn't look like to me, so.
Home office.
Well, yeah, I know, but that's the point. It's your
Right.
home. You're at
Right.
home. Well, not many
Right.
people got to have a home office, pre-COVID. Let's talk about
Right.
it. So people now hope to bring their human self into the workplace, and they expect two things. They expect their leader to see them as a human self, get a
Mm-hmm.
job done and get results. We talked about that. And they'd like to see and expect to see some humanity out of their managers, I
Yeah.
believe.
Yeah. And do you think, is that a recent development, or are leaders just understanding people better? Because you write about things like empathy and being able to lead with emotion and vulnerability, uh,
Well,
right?
I think what, I don't know. I do have an answer, but someone said, "Oh, the Gen Z or Gen," it's just not the young kids. No, that's so you can't. I think it's actually the change that's driven by technology,
Hmm.
blurring work and life, and that start. It just, it just gotten. I didn't have a cell phone when I started, so I went home. And someone called me on my phone, it'd be weird. So you went home. You went home. Now
Right.
you didn't have a computer either. There's no thing. So you didn't go to work at home. You might do some paperwork.
Yeah.
So I think one thing is that the blur has gotten so much, and I think people now the recent change might be, yes, people are saying, okay, I expect something different. I do not want
Yeah.
to be a cog in the wheel, and I don't want to work with that kind of manager. I mean, the other thing going on is social media. I believe this strongly. It just complicates things. I mean, the world's tough. There's a lot of crap
Yeah.
going on. I mean, now we had
Hmm.
another. It depends. It doesn't matter what side you're on in the world. Another bad thing nearly happened. Or did
Right.
it? So it's a lot of stress. And you wake up in the morning, you go like that on your phone, and there's all the news. So
Well.
even more people need some humanity brought into
Hmm.
their daily life.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I've seen leaders when world events or something traumatic happens, I think recognize that people need a little space to at least have the opportunity to talk about how they're feeling, and realizing some people don't want to share how they're feeling, but to give some space rather than, I mean, I think of, being at work in an office at a software company in Texas on 9/11, 2001. Like, we all did get back to work that day, but it took a while. I mean, there was just that need, to be there with each other, and to
It's
think, when are we ready to go back? When are we ready to try working now? And how much of your mind was really on that? It was hard that day.
I remember, I was in DC in the DC office. I mean, you could
Oh, wow.
see. Now we were out in Bethesda, but you could see the smoke of the Pentagon.
Hmm.
And our staff was, I mean, shaken. And some of them
Mm-hmm.
were like, you were really worried they're going to run out in the street and get run over by a car. Because, like, so we
Right.
actually, moving further, we shut the doors. We said, nobody comes. Well, I want to go see my kids. And it wasn't like we were trying to control you. It was just what you
Right.
said. Everyone needs time to decompress, get your act together, whatever emotional state. Then you can go outside and go take the subway and see your kids or whatever you want to do. Although probably
Yeah.
the subway's closed. Yeah, it's that
Yeah.
was, the
So
Scott
yeah.
Kirby, oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Well, I was going to tell you, Scott Kirby told me a story, CEO of United. I have a chapter in there, Small Acts, Big Impact, which you can imagine.
Mm-hmm.
Congratulations. And he
Yeah.
told me, he's a deep believer in this. He told me a story after the George Floyd murder and shooting or choking and murder. He called, the story comes that his wife was on a plane. And the captain came out and said, "Oh, I love United. I love your wife, your husband, his boss." And
Yeah.
she said, "Well, why?" And it was a black female. And she said, "Well, Scott called every one of the captains who were a person of color just
Mm-hmm.
to check in." To your point, didn't have an answer,
Wow.
didn't
Right.
say. I mean, he said, "We're here for you," but he didn't try
Right.
just to check in. And that was your version. Made me think of when you said that of
Mm-hmm.
everyone had to adjust. Nowadays, we use the word process. Everyone had to process in their own way.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought that was very powerful to your point.
Yeah.
It,
Yeah.
it's such a simple thing. Unfortunately, probably not as many calls as he would have liked to have made, but,
Yeah.
probably spent one morning calling
Mm-hmm.
a chunk of people. And
Yeah.
anyway.
Yeah. One other word I wanted to explore a little bit. So we've talked about, generosity. I think authenticity. I think people know, but I think the word vulnerability is worth digging into a little bit, because I think that's a word sometimes that means different things to different people. And I'll lay a card on the table here that I don't think vulnerability equals weakness at all, but
Nope.
I think some people do associate that. So how do you define and talk about vulnerability as a leader?
Yeah, no, I think to your point on different things to different people, because vulnerability can be quite simple, which sends a real positive signal about authenticity. I mean,
Mm,
you never vulnerability, maybe showing a little bit of your human self, showing a little
mhm,
bit of or a lot of when you're uncertain, show a little
mhm,
bit of when you're shaken like they're shaken.
mhm.
Actually, I should look up what the real definition is, but,
I,
but,
I can give you one that I use, but okay.
but
I mean,
go ahead. Yeah, tell me.
yeah, I mean, what I was taught about this, a couple of years ago in the context of psychological safety, is that vulnerability is doing something that puts yourself at some level of risk or danger, right? So a leader saying, "I don't know," or "I'm uncertain," they might fear, "Oh, my people aren't going to respect me anymore because I don't have the answer." When I think actually the opposite is true.
Yeah, well, I think so too. I mean, yeah, I'll tell you another story. I had a boss, not a boss, I had a colleague at BCG in New York who was afraid to say, "I don't know." He, he
Mm-hmm,
didn't want to look weak. Now, he was a black guy, so there's on
mm-hmm,
top of it, well, and so he would say sometimes if he could tell the teams were stuck, before they turned to him and looked for an answer, he'd leave the room because he didn't want to say, "I don't know."
mm,
Now you guys, so one day he said, "This isn't working," because how unpredictable. And he one time said, "Well, guys, I don't know either." And it's just the opposite of your point. It was, "Oh wow, you don't know too? Oh, none of us know." And he said, like this energy came in the room, and they all started to solve together. And I
right,
think the biggest thing about showing that kind of vulnerability is you free others from because you got roadblocks. You have some roadblock. Maybe you're perfect, but I don't really are.
mm-hmm,
You free others to say, "Oh, it's okay to not know. Oh, let me get
right,
past that and start to move." So,
right.
I don't, the danger is a big word. I'm not sure it goes it depends, I
Yeah.
guess.
Well, risk or
Yeah,
harm or
so there is
loss.
risk. There's
Oh,
risk,
right.
but especially risk as we've been trained. I don't believe there's risk. Now, if you're a black 33-year-old female and you sobbed every morning when someone said, "How was your night?" That might be a little over vulnerable. I mean, you got to figure out where the line's drawn. There's common
Right.
sense. But, being able to say,
Oh,
"I don't know." Someone told me another story of a woman, this maybe 20 years ago, a partner at BCG. Another woman noticed she would put on her calendar, which the calendar was on your desk in those days, "Go pick up my son." And she
mhm,
goes, "Wow, no one ever would expose a vulnerability if I have a family and I might have to deal with them." This is 20 or 30
really?
years Yeah, I
Wow.
know, because
Okay.
you would never. And now you and I would nowadays. That's like what? That's a vulnerability. But to
Yeah.
show
Wow.
as a woman that she had a family she had to take care
Yeah.
of.
Well, but I think you're bringing up a point, and maybe we can talk about um, inclusion and equity, or DEI, diversity, equity, inclusion, depending on language we use. But I think there are, or I've learned, people have helped people different than me. Here you and I, two white guys,
I
having
know we got a benefit here. We know.
um, of people different than me, helping me understand the difference. Like, for one example, I've talked to people on this show and in other settings. Like, if I say I don't know, I feel like, well, oh, someone might think badly of me. I hope not, but like somebody who's a black woman might say, well, now people are going to be judging. That's going to be reflecting on other black women. That's something I have the privilege of not really worrying about.
Yeah,
Of how is my vulnerability, or saying I don't know, how, that's a different layer of burden. Perhaps I've definitely heard people share that.
well, yeah. I mean, I'm just my brain's processing the unfair burden that this person has to go through, as opposed to being able to say, because what they probably have to do is position it differently. Well, wow, with
Mhm.
all my analysis, I didn't get to an answer to that piece yet. I'm not really so, and I got this day. You probably have to wrap it more than just I don't know, like what the hell,
Right. Right.
um, which is grossly unfair. Is what's going through my mind. Um,
Yeah.
but
Yeah, and that's something I've gotten a better understanding of
yeah,
in recent years, and I'm trying to understand better, and some of that comes down to empathy and recognizing different people, are in different circumstances.
yeah. Well, no, I think, well, actually, 2 points. One, and then your role as a leader is to actually try to understand and what is, taking the perspective where they're coming from. You don't have to go do the job for somebody, take over, solve everything, but you got to make sure it's at least as best you can. They have a fair shake. I had
Hmm.
not a fair shake, a good shot. I did these dinners when I was head of North America, deliberate discourse dinners, we called them. We got a diverse set of people at dinners. Eight, there's like a room was full, but tables of eight, and we had a set of facilitated questions. But one of the dinners, there was a guy, black guy, manager at BCG, and he said to me, he said, "Joe, do you know first, do you know what my life's like?" And I said, well, "No, of course I don't." I mean, he said, do you understand? Every morning, and he lived in a city where he could walk to work. Every morning, I wake up, and when I walk out of my condo or whatever, I worry I will get shot as I walk to work.
Mm.
Do you worry about getting shot when you walk to work? Holy shit!
Right.
And I don't want
Right.
to go into a diversity thing, but it's the colorblind thing. I learned maybe it's 10 years ago or 15. Yeah, you can say that. I don't think so. That guy is worried about being shot. You and I aren't. And that
Right.
takes that takes some of his mind share that you and I can think about work, and he has to think
Right.
about where he walks. Um,
Right. Right. So within BCG, I mean, I'd like to learn more about the Center for Inclusion and Equity, and I'm not here to criticize language, but it's just interesting. It's a question of inquiry around why that language, and what does that mean to BCG, and what's the imperative
well,
for
yeah, and
inclusion and equity.
let me be two things. I mean,
Yeah.
the Center for Inclusion and Equity I formed it when I was head of North America to serve clients who are thinking about this topic and how they
Oh, okay.
should.
So,
Now,
okay.
but BCG internally, I don't know what we call it. We call them
Okay.
networks, but diversity. We call it the diversity networks and our diversity
Okay.
team. Um, we probably throw around DE and I, but
Hmm.
but to your point, your real question, the reason or the necessity, especially for us. I mean, we need very talented people. I mean, everybody
Hmm.
does, but and we're competing for all the other places, the banks and the hedge funds and VC firms and the other consulting firms to get these people. And no
Hmm.
offense, but there just ain't enough white males to fill everybody's coffers. And put another way, all the data, the investment banks have done it, consultants
Hmm.
have done it, show that when you have a more diverse team, which is more diverse backgrounds and experiences,
Hmm.
insights, not
Right.
you get a better answer, or you get the results in companies that have more diversity in leadership. The numbers are better. So
Hmm.
it is an imperative. Well, for us, three reasons. One, you do drive better results. Well, actually,
Mm-hmm.
42, our clients are looking for, wait a minute, I want to see, I want to see what we see. I want to see us. 3, pools, you just got to make the pools bigger and bigger. And 4, as I said, 60, most of our staff's under 30. They expect to be around a diverse, well, most of them, maybe some don't, expect to be around a diverse group of people.
Right.
So yeah, I think there's no company, well, it depends how big you are, but eventually if you're going to grow and want to get the best talent, you're going to be looking at all the pools you can fish. Otherwise,
Right.
there's
Well,
no.
and I spent a lot of time working with a software company of about 40 people. A majority of the company is, roughly 25 to 34. And, the internal discussion, company at the smaller scale, as opposed to somebody big like a BCG or a P&G or companies like that, there's been a lot of feedback from employees about making extra effort when you talk about pools of where you're posting jobs online, making that extra effort to not fall back on an excuse of like, well, we can't find candidates of color. And employees have given feedback. Here's how you can help go find them. They are out there. Put in a little extra effort, and posting jobs to different job boards really isn't that much effort. But some of it's a matter of awareness. And thankfully, employees would speak up and share some ideas about that.
Yes, I done some work with a guy named John Rice, who leads management leaders of tomorrow, for tomorrow, and he helps people of color, get up into the business ranks.
Mm-hmm.
But he and I were talking somewhere, and he pointed out that it's actually, and I agree with this at BCG too. You've got to get into those right job boards. That's not that hard once you figure it out. But it's not hard so much getting a diverse workforce in. But what is still very hard is retention.
Yep.
And there's so much wrapped up in that. One, people look up and say, "Oh, I see nobody like me." Really? Or 2, to your point on the burden, I would not have understood the burden you pointed out about the Black woman that shows vulnerability, and she's carrying it for everybody else. So the burden they carry without someone like them around, or to not take the blame. Very, very, very talented, diverse people get poached all the time. So all the more you have to make it a great place to work that's inclusive. And I will tell you I think it's hard. I mean, I don't want to, that one I can't be their coach. It's really hard. I mean, it's just continuous effort. And of course, you have to have your senior ranks. It just can't be all one type of person. It's just not going to. You won't keep it.
And things have been so polarized and politicized, and I'm not trying to make this a political discussion, but my question to you, Joe, as a senior executive in a business, what do you think of when there's these external forces, and some employees within the company undoubtedly maybe share political views that are very negative of DEI initiatives and concepts? How do you navigate that?
Well, a couple of answers. First off, a good organization has a clear purpose, I hope, and a set of values. And, you live by your values through thick and thin. I mean, BCG, respect for the individual, clients come first, diversity matters, a set of these things. And so someone can be whatever they want. No, these are our values. We're falling back our values. It's actually also a clever way to think about it in the context of as a business leader, do you speak up or not? Well, if it's so, that's the first thing I would say. But then, I think we have to be careful. I tell you, my second podcast, it was very interesting. The person doesn't matter, from another country, and really got on me about DEI and started challenging me and pushing. It was very interesting. I thought, whoa, is this what these things are like? It was really intense. And he said at one point, this fellow said, "Well, Joe, all you woke people, all you want is equal outcomes for everybody." And I said, "Whoa, buddy. No one ever said that. I want people to have a chance, an equal shot. Now, when they walk through the door, if they fail, they fail. They got to be coached. Everyone gets a coach. Right. No one said equal outcomes, but it's very telling for me, because that's what he thinks. That was one person, but he wrapped all of us wokey, whatever that means, but all of maybe more on that side.
Yeah.
And we just want the epitome of social. I don't know what you call that because communism's bastardized. So and it was very telling. I thought, well, if that's what you think, I'd be upset too because I didn't say I
Sure.
want everybody having outcomes. I
Yeah.
want people to have a chance, and then they got to do their best, like I got to do my best, and I have
Yeah.
benefits. So it was really that's the one I think we have to also be careful. Now the problem is we don't talk to each other enough. We're not going to go political, but I can say, to even understand, like that person told me that. Now I'll say, oh, that's what you're thinking. Oh, well, let's
Right.
talk about it. Now we got
Hmm.
to, he might not believe me if I say I didn't think that, but
Sure.
at least we got to a difference. It was
Right.
material.
Yeah. Well, I hope that didn't feel like, well, I mean, did it feel like a mistake to go on that podcast? And do you adjust, or is it just a matter of kind of knowing, what kind of discussion are you
No,
preparing yourself
it's
for? Yeah.
well, no, it wasn't a mistake. One, because every time you engage with somebody new, it's very interesting and you learn something, so I didn't, and I actually learned a lot the way that fellow handled it.
Hmm.
He also said to me at one point along the way, well, I suppose your friends at BCG would be angry with me. I said, well, no, they'd love good debate. So they'd like the debate. They wouldn't agree with your point of view, a lot of them,
Sure.
but
Sure.
they're happy to see the debate. No,
Mhm.
it was fine. But anyway, it doesn't matter. It didn't turn me off.
All right. Well, Joe, maybe one other question, just back to a broader leadership things. One thing you write about, that I agree with is, as you called it, the top-down, unilateral, single-focused leaders aren't effective in today's workplace. What can we do to help convince other leaders? And is it possible to convince them if they've got decades of experience operating in that mode?
Well, if they have decades, then pretty soon they're going to retire. So no, that's
Yeah.
a bad answer.
Well, mid career, 2 decades.
No,
They
no,
still have runway of
I
wanting to be
think
top
no,
down.
no. I think this. Well, to convince them, I mean, if they are, is a couple of points. If they do not believe it and just want to be top down dictatorial, um, fine. I don't think it'll work because I've thought more about this. If you just get promoted and you have a 4-person team, let's say, if the team doesn't deliver, you can just do it yourself. Probably you might have to stay up 18 hours a day, but you could do it. If you're now Joaquin, my point, the J&J guy, 100,000
Right.
people, he can't do anything. I mean, he allocates funds, he motivates, but I'll go back to motivate, sets direction, and then it's all about that 100,000 doing the best they can do and his job. So I actually think, the old command and control, I think either they'll discover, oh shoot, I'm not. Well, it's their place. I mean, like some of these tech guys run the thing and they run it their way, and so be it. But people come and go. They just pay them enough that they don't mind them going. So I think they'll over time people won't get promoted. You won't get the best people.
Right.
The good people leave your organization. I just think that you saw during COVID the leaders and now nobody knew the answer, so it was easy to be vulnerable because nobody. But you saw Arnie Sorensen, the Marriott guy, do that video as he's dying of cancer about I don't know what I'm just going to do my best. Scott Kirby talked about. He said I went to the team and said I don't know sure when we're going to fly again, and
Yeah.
his team said don't say that you sounded like you don't know what something. What am I going to do? Say we're going to fly in 19 days and 4 hours?
Yeah.
I mean, what do I know? So, I actually, so I don't know. But I do have another point, I think, is that even if you believe in the command and control, you have to have your people delivering.
Hmm.
And so the more of the, whether it's my traits in my book or the others, the listening, the showing some realness, you can do that even if you don't deeply believe. These are just practices you can take.
Yeah.
Congratulating and thanking somebody.
Yeah.
It ain't
Yeah.
very hard.
Right. Well, I mean, I've heard people talk about leadership change, and they say, well, these other concepts. It's not complicated; it's just different, and I think that's one of the
Well, yeah, and
big challenges.
it takes a little bit of maybe the way, especially as you pointed out, you and I as white males weren't necessarily raised to think about it. I mean, we weren't I don't know, it depends on your parents and all that, but we weren't necessarily raised to show vulnerabilities, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I think
Well,
these practices are shifting. But
yeah.
this is not to say, you know, we got to be very careful. You still have to get the results. You know, if you're
Yes.
really like a CEO, you have to have a strategy. You got to have a vision. You got to be able to manage and set metrics. You know, that doesn't change.
Right.
This is like,
Yeah.
you know, the new. Well, it's just head, heart, and hand. It's given the heart maybe a greater beat. You know.
Yeah. But I mean, as we wrap up here, I think, Joe, you shared a good example of, where is that line? Like, one level of vulnerability is saying, I don't know. And okay, here's what we need to do to figure it out together, as opposed to, it doesn't mean that you need to cry at work. It doesn't mean you need to bring every detail of your personal life into the
No,
office.
no,
Like,
no.
there could be oversharing
Yeah,
as
yeah, of
opposed
course.
to, I think, effective, humble leadership.
Yeah, well, because you started with the word very being authenticity. You know, if everyone just thinks you're perfect,
Hmm.
it's just not going to work. I mean, they really
Right.
going to follow you, really, and be inspired and motivated, really?
Yeah.
No, no. So well, you know, vulnerability can be a lot of things. I was just thinking that I had one of the executives I interviewed. She worked at Chevron as a leader, and or Shell, I don't remember which one, 25
Yeah.
years ago, you know, corporate oil, blah, blah, blah. And they
Mhm.
weren't delivering at the level they wanted. And they had contractors. And normally you never talk to the contractors because, you know, you're Shell. And she actually, one of the contractors had a better safety record. And she actually went to that contractor, said, what are you guys doing that I could learn from? And she said, if my colleagues had heard I went to that contractor, I would have been roasted. She said, that was such a
Yeah.
vulnerable. But he has some great ideas that I copied. You know, like,
Well, and there we get better results.
vulnerability. You know, it was a high risk
Yeah.
move. She thought.
Wow.
You and I would roll our eyes like, well, gosh, go get the best answer anywhere you can get it.
Right. Right. But there are those dynamics, and yes, it
Yeah.
comes down to leadership. Well, I've really enjoyed the chance to talk with you here, Joe. Again, our guest is Joe Davis. His book is titled "The Generous Leader: 7 Ways to Give of Yourself for Everyone's Gain." So I hope you go check that out. There'll be links in the show notes. You can also learn more, joedavis.com. And you're also doing speaking and other things people can learn about at your website, right?
Yep. Yep. My website, or, you know, I actually, since I wrote this book, I pay more attention to LinkedIn. So if you send me a message, I'll even respond. You know?
All right. If you can, you probably now see the joedavis.com is easy. Searching Joe Davis on LinkedIn would give you a lot of
No,
results.
well, Joe Davis
Davis
BCG, and you have
BCG.
a chance. But yeah,
And
no, you're right. You're right.
I'll put a link in the show notes to Joe's LinkedIn profile. So again, thank you so much. Really appreciate you taking time to be here.
Thanks, Mark. This was a lot of fun.